This is Justin Overdorff of Lightspeed Venture Partners. And I'm panicked about water damage in my house.
Noodle.
Hey, Howdooski.
Hey, did you have a nickname?
Oh, I had a lot of nicknames, but
one.
I'm not going to tell you any of them because
No,
you're going to
come on.
start keeping this. Remember that time I got back from the doctor's office and I told her what you called me? And you called me that for a year afterwards. No
I
way.
don't remember.
Oh, that's good.
All right, you crazy Swede. So Canute, who never talks about himself, we can't get him to talk about himself. And it's hurting the show. The ratings are dropping. People want more Canute, and I can't get you to say anything.
Traumatic childhood.
So it's a good day to be alive. Just saying that. We started the show while COVID was raging. We were scared to hug.
We never do anyway.
Our physical relationship fizzled. And we're about to get our own new studio, right?
Yes,
if
we
it all
are.
comes through.
Yeah.
That's pretty exciting.
I know, it's very exciting.
Mm-hmm. Just I'm ready to quit. Anyways, so we're 170-ish so episodes in. That's a lot of work. That's 170 hours of me listening. So for my therapist, every time I go to my therapist, she goes, you need to listen more. I said, have you heard my fucking podcast? I barely talk. So speaking of therapy, I don't even have a segue because I don't have a segue for this fellow. His name is Justin Overdorff, which is German for this is my first podcast. I think that's what the interpretation is. And I've never met an Overdorff. There was a Dorfman in Animal House. I think it was Dorf. So we don't care. LGBTQ, Germans, we don't care on Panic with Friends. We're neutral. We're podcast neutral. We have no prejudices. By the way, I watched the Dave Chappelle podcast. Have you watched it?
No, I haven't.
Oh, my God. He's just on so many layers pulling jokes. Can't even tell if he's making up the story or if it's true. It's just, he's at another level.
I will have to check that out.
Yeah, he basically did a 1 hour show that there was no real jokes. It was just a story within a story within a story. I mean, what a level that guy's reached. You know, we're lucky to have guys like that. As much as he's polarizing some people, we are lucky to have someone like that and who's willing to go to the third rail. And,
Very
okay,
true.
speaking of the third rail, now I have a segue. Stripe. They are becoming a first rail. Stripe is probably the biggest company that nobody's ever heard of. Of course, if you're in Fintech, you've heard of Stripe. And if you've bought something online, you've used Stripe. And they're not a mysterious company at all. They're very public, even though they're private. The two brothers, the Collison brothers who started, are not shy. I wouldn't say they're cavalier or outgoing. They're just very front and center at the center of this fintech revolution, creating part of it. And so my friend Justin, who's joining us, was there for about 5 years. He joined Stripe, Canute. He joined them in 2015 to lead biz dev and strategic partnerships, where he successfully built a team of partnership professionals that executed some of Stripe's largest and most profitable strategic deals, including relationships with WooCommerce, Xero out of New Zealand, Amazon, I think I've heard of them, and Facebook. And then while at Stripe, Justin incubated several new areas of business innovation, including Stripe's entry into small business lending with the launch of Stripe Capital and the launch of Stripe's issuing platform, Genius Products. In 2019, Justin changed roles to lead deals for Stripe's M&A and investing practice to deploy Stripe's balance sheet capital for strategic acquisitions and investments in early-stage technology companies. Previous to Stripe, Justin was corp dev and business dev team at Yelp, executing the same thing, key partnerships with Amazon, Samsung, Nokia, T-Mobile. But now, after a great run at Stripe, which we can talk about because it's a company that people need to understand how they've helped the internet, he's at Lightspeed. Didn't know that was happening. And what's exciting is we're in our first deal together, which we'll talk about, called Payitoff. A Michigan guy, Bobby Matson, and Justin and I are on the cap table. And by the time this show announced, we've announced a Series A with a great group of people. And we'll talk about that a little bit, how Stripe and the ancillary business and how he sees the world post-Stripe. And so let's get him on the horn.
You got it.
Justin.
Hey, Howard. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Where are you today? In New York?
I am in the great state of New Jersey. I live in Montclair, New Jersey, a little bit outside Manhattan. Yep.
And you are panicked about, and I told you you're fucked, and we're going to probably pipe my wife in here to talk about how fucked you are because we had a water leak as well. And all I can say to you is, good luck. I mean, I'm not even on the other side of mine. It's been 12 months. Finding the water leak is one thing. I think you're almost there, but just getting the contractors and doing this stuff right. I feel for you because I've been living with tape and cardboard and no master bath for about 12 months and through no fault of my own. I mean, I always flush, floss, and yet we had a water leak, Canute. And I try not to shower very often or brush my teeth, and yet we still had a water leak. So, Justin, I don't know what to tell you other than I feel for you. That's a horrible, horrible thing, and it's something to be panicked about, and let's move on. Sorry, hopefully I didn't wreck your day, but I have to be honest with my guests.
No, I appreciate it. I mean, I hope we're not 12 months, waiting for this to be solved. Because if that happens, I think my wife will certainly lose her mind. But we'll get there slowly, I think.
If you beat 12 months, please let me know so I can hang it over my wife's head and say, what the fuck is going on? Why did it take 12 months? Not that she should be in charge of all this, but she offered. So let's talk about from toilets to fintech. That's what I do here, segues. So tell me how Stripe recruited, how did you know that it was the time to move on to Stripe?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of a rather out of the blue, situation. I mean, I was at Yelp, working with a great team doing biz dev and corp dev work. We had recently acquired, E24, which is a great, acquisition. We were doing some really interesting, exciting stuff on the partnership front with deals with Amazon and Apple and things like that. And it sort of was one of those things where I actually just kind of got punged by a recruiter who said, listen, we're looking for experienced BD professionals, that have built teams. And so I spent some time kind of researching Stripe. At the time, I didn't know anything about online payments. I had an inkling, a level of interest on financial technology just from a personal perspective, but didn't know anything about payments specifically. And I spent, a couple weeks recruiting with the team, met people like Christina Cordova, Billy Alvarado, and then certainly the Collison brothers, and was really impressed by everything that I, kind of interacted with, and was sold on, the concept of increasing the GDP of the internet. And so I joined.
So that's a great mission, right?
Yeah, it really is.
That's our podcast, to create the GDP of nonsense. That's going to be our.
We've already done that.
So hang on. But now we have a mission. Thank God.
I joke about that though.
Genius.
I mean, it's the GDP of the internet concept. It's such a. I mean, when I'm talking to founders, actually, it's a really interesting concept that it's such a simple.
Oh my God, I love it.
Sort of like mission, but it's such a big idea, and that sort of like hero moonshot idea is really the North Star for the company in everything that they do. And so as a result, it makes it really easy, frankly, like that statement, that phrase is what everybody in the company revolves their decision-making around. And I think it makes it really easy to kind of align the ships.
Unbelievable. No wonder. So when you joined, it was maybe 1 or 2 billion. What do you think it was?
It was $3.5 billion.
So $3.5 billion, and in 2015, $3.5 billion was a fucking, forget today's prices. In 2015, $3.5 billion was a stretch. So was there any point you were like, how am I going to make money? Like if I go and take the risk here, or the more work you did, the more you're like, I don't care. This is a great opportunity. Yeah,
I mean, so I certainly, because I didn't know a lot of the payments, I started doing a lot of research and reached out to many people that I would consider mentors and started to try to get intelligent about what the opportunity in front of Stripe was. And it was interesting that I got very sort of bipolar answers. Mm-hmm. You got some people where they're like, look, payments is a commoditized business. Margins go to zero. How can this be, a great business? At $3 billion, it's already overvalued. And you had other folks that were much more optimistic and I think much more kind of big picture thinkers and thought about how there is this secular trend that we've been talking about now for 10 plus years of commerce moving from an offline, default mode to rotating over to online. And, today I think, e-commerce is barely penetrated in overall commerce by, I think it's like, maybe 15%, 18%. And so there's still so much room to run. And so that trend and that kind of wind behind the sails is still there. And so, I think making the bet was, I think in hindsight, it sounds rather easy, but it certainly was a big question for me when I joined.
For sure. I remember talking about it, and I was like, I have some friends who interviewed at the CFO level at 4 or 5 billion, and they were just like, nah, I don't get it. And really smart people from banking sector, not to name names, but I will if I have to. So you make the move. You're a power couple because the missus is at Plaid.
Yeah, she joined Plaid about 2 years after I joined Stripe.
Wow. You may be the most powerful fintech couple in the world, unless one of the Collisons married a fintech person. So what the hell? You guys must be the most boring people. Tell me you don't talk about fintech at home. Is there a rule that says the Overdorffs can't talk about fintech?
Yeah, we don't really talk about it. I mean, it's certainly it's not something that becomes dinner conversation. Although there are some funny kind of stories about the two of us working on things that ended up being maybe mildly competitive, or at least Plaid was doing one thing and we were working on something, and it so happened a couple of weeks later where we end up being able to talk about it. We realized that we were maybe potentially trying to vie for the same type of opportunity in some ways. So there's always interesting, fun stories like that. But no, I mean, look, we're a normal married couple. I think we're certainly heavily, invested and over-rotated on fintech. So if this whole thing is a big sham, we're screwed.
Yeah, if there was a fantasy app for marriage, the Water Lake swung odds on the Overdorfs to like a minus 140. I don't even know what that number means. I just like saying minus 140 on the odds, and I'll have Ryan Spoon check that out for me. But if you guys can get through the Water Lake, I feel like, I mean, fintech's easy. You're both in fintech. It's a fintech bubble, blah, 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 blah. I mean, you're sailing through life, the two of you. But the Water Lake is exciting. And I say this as someone who doesn't want to see you guys break up, but as an odds person, I feel really bad. So Stripe now's, you've 90 billion. What's your best guesstimate at what the people, the internets are saying the valuation is?
The last public round was 95 billion. And I think, there's rumors we've seen things like tweets and certain stories come out where I think secondaries are trading, upwards of 150, sometimes a little bit more, 150 billion. But that's, those are transactions that are happening behind the scenes. So it's hard to really put a pin on any of it.
Yeah, Canute just wrote down your phone number. He has a couple of big real estate opportunities.
Got some dollar signs in my eyes right now.
So these are big numbers. So congratulations on spotting an opportunity. And I have to say, I can't remember what I would have told you other than maybe go with your instincts, because you have good instincts. But, catching a company at $3 billion for
we talked about it. You probably don't remember it.
Did I say anything positive, I hope?
Yeah, no, we talked about it. We talked about it at, I can't remember which name, but it was either Lindsaypalooza or Stocktoberfest.
Right.
Was when the conversation happened. And I asked you, it was actually, you'll love this. It was the year that the Robinhood founders were presenting in the bar.
So that was 2014. Okay.
Yep. So it was 2014.
And did I give you good advice, hopefully?
Yeah. I mean, your statement that you made, if I remember correctly, was you basically just said, look, there is so many interesting things happening in fintech broadly, in big picture, and that if I wanted to go work on something for 10 years that was really interesting, that was unknown but had very, very high asymmetric upside, that making that bet was probably a good move. That's basically what you said.
I rarely give it's the first time I've given the applause to myself. 170 episodes. So Canute, thank you.
You're welcome.
I gave good advice. Now I feel guilty because I think I'm giving him good water leak advice, and I don't feel the outcome is as exciting as Stripes. So please don't tell your wife what I said about the water leak, and I may have a person for you. So, and by the way, chewing gum works in a pinch. Wrigley's sticks very well. So that's right. You used to come to Palooza we were really, all of us, what a group that was, right? We were fucking early around that whole stuff.
Certainly a motley crew, for sure. But I still keep in touch with several people. I mean, I keep in touch with Savneet and a whole bunch of others, Woody, et cetera.
Well, Woody's done amazing.
Yeah.
He's been on the podcast a few times. Savneet's been on the podcast, fucking running Power Technology. Really smart group of weird people that were all kind of indirectly in fintech. So what was the most exciting part of Stripe for you? Was it moving to the M&A side? What was the most fulfilling part?
I'd say the beginning was the most fulfilling. I mean, the first 2.5, 3 years there were a pretty amazing experience, from just like breakneck pace growth. The company, was rather, even though it was $3.5 billion, it was rather small. It was like, I don't know, 150, 200 people, somewhere in there when I joined. And, it just like everyone was all hands on deck, working on really amazing things. And the partnerships that our team focused on were really sort of the, beginning, moments of figuring out the best way to commercialize some of these products in certain areas, the deals like Shopify and WooCommerce, and then things like, Xero on the invoice side and accounting side. Like our team worked on those and executed those, and they ended up being the playbook for a lot of the largest platform opportunities that Stripe executed. And so we kind of laid the foundation for that, which is really exciting and frankly, probably the most rewarding thing I did there.
So, because Shopify is my favorite, Netflix and Shopify and Nike rank up there as my favorite companies. So with Shopify, tell me tell the listener how Stripe helps how that connection works.
Yeah, I mean, it's really I would describe it as a very mutual relationship, in that the two companies treat each other like design partners. It's a true partnership. Everything from the employees that are working on the deals all the way up to the executive teams. They're very closely aligned and they work together. And really what it is, I think both sides sort of feed off each other in terms of providing insights into their strategic goals. And as a result of sharing those opportunities and goals with each other, there's an opportunity together to build great products that match each other's roadmaps, right? And so when you do things in step with each other, you end up with great outcomes. And that's been the case for both companies.
So tell me how Stripe works and how then it works with Shopify. The win-win scenario, how does it all play out? Where does the money flow?
Sure. I mean, what's happening is Stripe essentially is building the infrastructure for Shopify to accept payments and make payouts to the merchants that use the Shopify ecosystem, right? And so what's happening is when you are a merchant that, let's say, sells socks, from the middle of nowhere, Ohio, you set up a store on Shopify, and when you set up a store, rather than just getting a website, what you're getting is you get a website that has payments and a whole bunch of other financial products, under the same umbrella, and it sort of just happens out of the box. And so you don't have to worry about things like in the past, you'd have to set up a website, you'd have to go to a payment gateway like auth.net, and you'd have to integrate that, and then you'd have to set up a bank account, and then you could actually start to process, your money. But, today, instead what happens is Shopify is built on top of Stripe's infrastructure. They've white labeled it effectively. And so when you sign up for Shopify, you get Stripe right out of the box. And that's a great win-win relationship, because what happens is Shopify gets to focus on what they're best at, which is building these really great tools for merchants to build their businesses. And Stripe gets to do what it does best for Shopify, which is build really, really large scaling payment infrastructure that sounds really boring, but is incredibly complex. And doing that so that Shopify can keep its resources on its main focus rather than, building payment infrastructure, it allows Shopify to do other things. And so that's the kind of, yin and yang of the relationship.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I just texted Harley saying he was on my podcast. Not that he's more important than you, but he was like guest 110. I texted Harley that they should change their tagline to we increase the GDP of merchants. Would that cause a fight internally if they went with that?
I don't know. That's a question that's a question above my pay grade.
You're such a diplomat. So I'm not going to get you to bite on anything. So we'll keep it serious. It's the German in you.
Yeah, there you go. Well, it's also the other thing too is, I mean, I don't work at the company anymore. It's been a year since I've been there. It's hard to say, for some of this stuff. But look, I think like in a joking sense, like certainly GDP of the internet, it feels like a very Stripe saying. And so I don't know if they've ever trademarked it, but I certainly hope they have, because it is a great line.
So you go work on that, and then Amazon. How hard would it be to get Amazon to come up with one, or do they just get it themselves? Or was that the hardest deal? What was the hardest get them over the goal line? Is it Facebook or Amazon? It's got to be one of the two.
Well, there are different types of deals. I mean, they weren't really using I would describe those two opportunities as so the Facebook transaction, or I should say, deal was really around two things. One was powering some of their commerce work, and then powering or thinking about working with them on the Libra initiative, which is a whole nother bag of worms. But with Amazon, it was actually a bunch of conversations around how they use their products, how they use their payment products in places like Asia, Southeast Asia, and then some other conversations around them actually working with us with our Atlas program at Stripe, which is sort of this business in a box. You can basically create a C Corp with a couple clicks. And when you do that, it's a great opportunity for entrepreneurs to create a C Corp very quickly. And once you have that, there's a whole bunch of obviously things that you need to do when you create a company. And one of them is if you're a developer-led organization, you have to get set up on your cloud compute. And so getting AWS in line and having a partnership where they offer their services at a relatively discounted rate to Stripe entrepreneurs was a key piece of the puzzle for us.
Genius. I got to say that this is how good Stripe Atlas is, because I rate everything as, could Ellen or I use the product without fighting? Like ending up in a family fight about how bad, screaming at each other about the printer. There's no printer that has solved the Ellen Howard mystery of seamless integration. Printers get thrown out of our house weekly. But with Stripe, we had to set up a trust quickly or an LLC for some kind of deal that we did to screw somebody, probably Canute, and to write you out of history at some point, Canute. And we like ping-pong fooeyed for who would have to deal with opening the Stripe thing. She didn't know what Stripe was, and I said, honey, it's easy. And when I say something's easy to Ellen, she's like, oh God, that's hard. And she went to Stripe, and like a minute later, she goes, oh my God, you finally gave me good advice. It took her like 2 minutes. It's a magical thing.
Yeah, it's it was one of the products that I was doing partnership work for, and it was an amazing thing to watch. Right, it's a great project to work on, and we routinely hear that type of feedback, which is great.
So your run comes to an end. Did you love investing? Because we talk about fintech off and on, and finally working on something bigger. It was inevitable that you became a VC? Was that something in your blood?
I don't know if it was inevitable, but it's certainly for the better part of, my time at Stripe, and even before then when I was at Yelp, I was starting to make angel investments. Some of those have worked out fairly well. A lot of them were in fintech. And, that experience plus my time and, before I had even shown up at Yelp and at Stripe, I worked at Summit Partners, which is a growth equity, shop, making investments there. And sort of, this muscle was certainly there in terms of my career. And so when the opportunity came to think about what was next, it was really, I don't know if it was a foregone conclusion, but it certainly was where I was spending a lot of my mental space. And I was fortunate enough, I took time off when I left Stripe. I left in October of 2020, took some time off, kind of turned my email off completely, didn't really talk to anybody, and hung out with my family during the pandemic, and kind of came up for air in January, and was very fortunate that I had a chance to talk to a lot of investment firms about opportunities. Was very fortunate that every door was sort of, opened. And for me, the fit of Lightspeed was really there. It was a perfect opportunity. They are a firm that is global in nature. They're multi-stage, great brand, and they have made fintech investments like Affirm, Blend, and Carta. These are fantastic companies, but they didn't have somebody that was focusing their time exclusively on fintech. And so when they kind of reached out and said, look, we're looking for someone to own this full stock within the firm, the fit for me really made a lot of sense. And so I was really excited to join, and I've known a lot of people from a lot of the partners there for many years. And so I was thrilled to join.
And so you get to build out a team, a true fintech team inside at Lightspeed.
That's correct. Yeah, and I'm based on the East Coast, right outside New York City, and so I'm in the midst actually right now of looking for office space to plant the flag, more formally. And we're hiring people. We're going to hire probably 2 or 3 people here in New York. over the next 6 to 12 months, and maybe a couple other folks in San Francisco over the longer haul. But fintech as a focus area is very, very much getting up and running and happening. And as you discussed, like, we're making investments. We happen to be doing one together with Payitoff. And, we recently announced our investment in Alloy, which is a later stage deal, a company that's based in New York that's in the kind of identity verification and decision space. But, we're here, we're fintech native, and we're really excited about it.
Yeah, I'm so excited. This is like, I feel like an old uncle because of Stocktoberfest and all the events and all the early fintech when there was no do-it-yourself, right? Like in 2014 when we met, I'm not thinking about Shopify. I definitely knew Stripe. I wasn't thinking about how big Shopify would be. Obviously, none of us knew about COVID, but like Robinhood was just starting, and Plaid, I don't even know if it had been founded. Yeah, it obviously had been founded. So like, I think you needed Plaid for this to work, and then you needed Stripe luckily for this e-commerce to be this tight. So now here we are, and this is what I want to now focus on as the future. It feels so crowded. So obviously it isn't, because you have a lot of experience and you wouldn't do this unless you were still bullish. But to a guy like me who was like in and so early in hindsight, like it didn't feel early, it just took forever. I'm kind of like the old grumpy guy, and I'm like, what else could be done? So what gets you excited? Obviously, we'll talk about, Alloy and Payitoff, but what gets you excited about, in a world where we've just had such a good run and everything's connected? Is it just the idea of the GDP is still just going to grow, and that's your macro pitch, or is there some unique feeling that you have around a specific area?
I think the concept of the GDP of the internet certainly is a big piece of the macro picture here for fintech. I mean, look, like I think the way to think about it, or at least how I think about it, is there is a proliferation of fintech companies starting, and there is a proliferation of companies like software businesses that are embedding financial services in their businesses. And so as a result, there's this large trend inclusive of, payments and things like Plaid, where you're doing authorizations on bank accounts and stuff. There are these pieces of the puzzle that enables these businesses to start, right? Like to start a neobank, right? You have a whole bunch of things that you have to build on top of, right? You have to build on with an issuing platform. You have to have, a sponsor bank. You have to enable some sort of payment infrastructure at some point in time, likely. And so with this, there's all these on the kind of like above the water, you have all these new types of fintech applications, financial services, embedded finance applications happening. And all of those companies that are starting, that are trying to build some sort of, whether it's consumer-facing tool or business-to-business merchant tool, they're having to build on top of infrastructure. And so underneath the water, you have all these really interesting, frankly, no-named companies, right? Companies like Stripe, companies like Lithic, companies like Alloy, that your average consumer has no idea that they exist.
Correct.
But they are crucial to actually enabling this fintech economy to exist, right? And so without Plaid, every consumer-facing fintech application that has been created since, Plaid, Yodlee, et cetera, has existed, could not happen without essentially the ability to connect to a bank account, authorize that bank account, and then move the money via an ACH transaction, right?
Yep.
Those applications could not happen. And so, that stuff is really critical, right? And so there's all these picks and shovels and infrastructure that sits in this kind of very, very unspoken place. And look, that stuff's going to be exciting, because I don't think we are anywhere near the end of the road for the growth of this stuff, right? Like, we know that payments by itself is in the very, very early innings of what I think is a probably 20-year secular trend, maybe longer. And the amazing thing about payments on the acquiring side, acquiring is what Stripe does primarily, but they've also now gone into the issuing side. Issuing on a dollar for dollar basis is actually bigger than acquiring, right? So you have two sides of the payment ecosystem that are absolutely in the most earliest stages. And so I think we have a lot of room to run, and there's a ton of asymmetric upside, which Lightspeed and myself are incredibly excited about.
Canute, get my checkbook. This is why I do the show, not for anybody else, but for me. I had the Carbon Health guys on. I don't know if you know Aaron or Russ Fraden, but I had Aaron, the founder, on.
We're Twitter friends, but that's about it.
Yeah, amazing people. I'll introduce you. But every day you wake up and you read the newspaper and it's like, inflation, inflation, inflation. I get it. It's been fucking brutal. Healthcare and education, and before that, banking. And look what APIs like Plaid and Stripe and all this stuff does to bring down the banks. And I think the next thing is going to be healthcare. It's so obvious now that I see Carbon and all this payment infrastructure built already that can be applied to healthcare once they do the APIs for patient data and a little bit more VC money goes into the healthcare system once it leaves social and Web 2.0. I'm pretty bullish. Even though we've had such a good run, I'm like you. I'm like, it's hard for me to get bearish when I feel that the deflation is about to finally start working towards, we definitely could see it in education. Like you as a parent, you can make a choice to say, you know what, fuck the system. I'm going to homeschool and my kid doesn't need to go to college. Fuck it. We'll get him a job in sales and let LinkedIn do its work. Like you got recruited, right? You go work at a great company, you'll get recruited. But healthcare has to happen. But that's a great take that you have on fintech. So with fintech, I remember passing on Alloy. It was probably like price, and it was a weird it was like a weird cap table at the beginning. I remember showing it to Roger Ehrenberg. Those guys grinded. And this is another lesson. It just got hot over the last year or so, would you say?
Yeah. No, I think the last 2 years, look, the founders, Tommy's
Laura amazing.
And Charles are, they've been working together for a long time. The initial, start of that was certainly, probably took them longer than they'd like to get the business up and running, but they're grinders. And I think like that characteristic alone is one of the reasons why we were so excited to lead their Series C, because they sort of have this mentality of just making, shit happen, frankly, right? Like get through it and make it work. And so it's been a run of 5-6 years for them. And, I think now they just got to a place where, one, the product is where they wanted it and the market needed it to be. And two, the market is now growing in a way with, this, as I mentioned, this proliferation of all these fintech businesses, all these financial services, and all these banks, frankly, that use their product too, that are starting to modernize their technology stacks, right? And how they do business. And Alloy is essentially a absolute key piece of that fintech stack that you have to have, financial service stack that you have to have. And so they're sort of the right product at the right time. And so we're very excited to back that team and ride that trend with them.
And so what does it do specifically?
Yeah, so Alloy's primary product is it's an identity decisioning platform. So think about it this way: when banks and fintechs are onboarding consumers, they have to go through for regulatory reasons, they have to go through a KYC and AML process that, involves them making sure, literally, KYC, know your customer, and AML, anti-money laundering, where they actually have to verify who that customer says, that they are. And so when you go through that, it's actually quite a difficult problem to solve for, because, there are other people in the world, hilariously enough, that maybe are named Howard Lindzen or Justin Overdorff. I don't know if there's many Knuts in the world, but there might be. And so
in Norway,
right? Exactly.
Yeah, there's 1,000.
But the point is, right, is that you have to verify that those people exist and that they are who they say they are. And so to do that, you have to, in the past, what the past looked like was basically spackling together a whole bunch of services that checked IDs, ran names against databases, checked IRS records, looked at SSNs, looked at EINs for businesses. And, all of this stuff was kind of held away in all these different pots of data sources. Well, what Alloy came around and did very intelligently was they said, listen, this is a common problem for all these companies that are building. Why don't we go around and build the integrations to all the data sources? So they've now built connections to, I think, upwards of 200 data sources that are used to ID and verify an individual for onboarding purposes. And so instead of having to build 200 sources, if you are building a consumer-facing fintech app, you just have to integrate with Alloy, and they solve all of your problems. And so their entire software infrastructure essentially allows you to onboard customers, verify them, and specifically onboard the customers that you want and turn away fraudulent or nefarious customers that you do not want, and avoid things like false positives, which are very costly.
Yeah, that was a Techstars one, wasn't it?
I believe they were Techstars, yes, in New York.
Yeah, I remember looking at it because I was doing a lot of stuff back then. I don't know if it was with Tarhini's class or before that with Tish.
I don't think they were a Tish class.
So anyways, congrats. I see them on Twitter. Those guys are just, I passed for the wrong reason, meaning like cap table, like I thought they weren't going to make enough money together. And that was the exact wrong reason. They've proven to stay together and be a great team. And the market finally is coming to them. And so let's talk about another company that has taken a long time in the creepy world of college finance and incumbents. I met Bobby through, I think Russ Fraden made an introduction, I don't know, through Chime or whatever. And I immediately just thought he was a super smart guy. But I invest for different, I'm not an infrastructure person per se, but when I met Bobby and he was solving the college payment and debt problem, I was like immediately intrigued. So what is it about Bobby or Payitoff that excited you?
Yeah, I mean, I think, what Payitoff does is they're sort of building infrastructure for the student debt industry, but I think that the infrastructure that they're building is largely applicable to, frankly, all debt, all kind of, credit opportunities. The big picture here is you have a student debt crisis, right, where you have, I think it's something like, consumer debt in the United States has reached something like, 15 trillion. And on the student debt side specifically, I think we now have something like around $1.5 to $2 trillion of student debt, which is the most, in history that we've ever had. And the pandemic certainly didn't help things in the context of, the administration's policy of sort of halting all payments was certainly a relief to the borrowers, but it doesn't, remove the loans, right? It just stopped the payments. And so the way to think about what Payitoff is trying to do is they're trying to do two things. One, they're building infrastructure that connects pipes, basically, that connects the borrowers, the lenders themselves, and the servicers, so all the kind of players in the ecosystem. And really what they're trying to do is they're trying to build the pipes to make it so that it's easy to understand what your debt is doing, understand the big picture, and certainly then obviously to pay it off. But the unique insight here that I think Bobby had, and this comes from Bobby's own experience with student debt, which is why I think the opportunity spoke to me so deeply. Bobby had his own student debt issue and he had to figure it out. And what he realized in that process was there are all these public and private student repayment programs that, if you are in a certain career and you have debt of a certain level and make salary of a certain, under a certain level, you qualify for a whole bunch of programs that will help you actually pay down your debt. Right. And to do that, though, to get access to that money, you have to do all these applications. And it's a really, really cumbersome process. So the big picture is Bobby and the Payitoff team are sort of thinking this from the perspective of, okay, well, if we help the lenders, help the borrowers, this is a win-win situation. So it's a kind of mutual aligned opportunity where you build these pipes and then you build infrastructure that really auto applies and then enrolls consumers in a lot of these debt repayment programs. And what that does, conceptually, if you think about it from how does this actually work? Well, let's say you have, $25,000 worth of student debt with a bank, and the bank says to you, you log in one day and you're checking your balance and say, hey, by the way, would you like to apply for a student repayment program? And you click the answer yes, and then within a blink of an eye, you've just sent off a bunch of applications to all these programs, and maybe in a couple weeks, you'll get information back that says, by the way, you qualified for a reduction of 50% of your loans. And so from a consumer perspective,
magic.
How amazing of an experience is that for you to experience that with the lender, right? The lender is basically saying to you, I'm going to help you lower your debt to us, right? And the reason why they want to do that, and Payitoff, by the way, is enabling all of that. They make that all possible. But Payitoff is saying, listen, if we can help lenders improve borrowers' experiences, what is the long-term impact on the relationship between the lender and that consumer? And the answer is it's incredible, because if you help a consumer get rid of their student debt faster and in a way that creates a high NPS score, what is the probability that that consumer is going to come back to you for a whole bunch of other financial service needs that they have in their life, including getting a mortgage, buying a home for the first time, which is some of the most profitable and very key pieces of the financial service industry, right? But those are long-term 30-year agreements, right? And so, this kind of opportunity for Payitoff to align the incentives between the borrower and the lender, and then create this relationship that ends up where the borrower, views the lender as a net positive as opposed to a net negative, which I think traditionally has been the case with student debt and servicing. It's an incredible win-win. And so Bobby and the team are building a great business. I'm super excited. We led it's a Series C technically because they did a pre-seed. So that's the round we all invested in. This is Series Seed. And we are excited to be off on the races with them.
Yeah, well, dude, I'm so lucky to be working with you. I mean, I think Russ, who introduced me, I met Bobby and I was like, whoa. As a guy who didn't have those problems, luckily, I heard his story and I'm like, and I saw the product and I saw how it worked and I saw you were also, so we led the seed, but it was the only fintech company in my portfolio of a lot that there was no COVID tailwind.
Yep.
Right? Like Robinhood, eToro, Stock, it was just a miracle, COVID, in terms of lucky growth or growth that was inevitable that got sped up 5 years. Whereas with Payitoff, it was like Bobby just had to deal with Brooklyn and COVID and young family and moving and that business basically on hold. So, really, it was a tough year, just like, hey, Bobby, hope you're doing well. Not much you can do. Well, let's see what Biden says next or Trump says next. And you knew they were going to kick the can down the road. So
yeah.
It's fun that you guys are helping steer the ship with him. But he's a great leader.
Yeah, the exciting thing I think about that is there certainly was a hiatus in terms of, obviously what's going on with the administration in the business. But, they took it as an incredible opportunity to just put their head down and build all the infrastructure and all the product that they knew they needed to build, because the commercial side had to kind of take a break for a little bit, but they put their head down, built everything they needed to build. And so now we know that the waterfall, the tsunami that's going to happen with student debt when the administration pulls, this stuff back, the tsunami that's going to happen and the payments that are going to have to hit the line here, it's going to be a massive, huge tsunami, and Payitoff is so incredibly well positioned because they're now, nailing these commercial deals because every bank and every lender and every student servicer is sort of getting to a place where they know they have to be ready for this massive tsunami, and Payitoff is the solution.
Well, Knut, you just made Knut's day. He remembers that he's an LP.
Yeah, I just remembered.
That's the most excited you get, Knut. Well, dude, quite a career. I'm proud of you. Do you have brothers and sisters?
I do. I have a younger brother and sister. They're twins, boy-girl twins.
Obviously not identical. My wife is a twin. So are they best friends?
They're very close. Yeah. I mean, as the older brother, I was sort of when they were younger, I was certainly jealous of the relationship. I mean, they did the things that all, twins do. They have their own little language. They're talking to each other and I can't understand what's happening, but they are very clearly, conspiring against me as the older brother. So certainly it's a big piece of the puzzle.
Yeah. You got a water leak and twins. You got a lot going on. So, and are they in tech at all?
No. My brother actually is taking over the family business. So my father is a third generation, owner of an asphalt and construction business in Western Pennsylvania. And my brother and my cousin, his father, my uncle, kind of ran it with my dad. And so now the two cousins are going to take it over together. And my sister, she lives in Denver, Colorado, and she's a career counselor at a university.
Well, God bless the Overdorffs. This has been fun to just finally catch up on things. It's like you were head down grinding the growth machine at Stripe. Is it fun to be like a VC? Are you excited?
Yeah, I mean, it's been great. I mean, it's hard work though, right? Especially in this environment, right? I mean, it's a great job, right? Like, don't get me wrong. I mean, it's an amazing job. I get to basically talk to amazing people every day and hear about their goals to change the world, and talk about really interesting problems, and that's exciting by itself. And certainly, it's an opportunity to trying to make bets that hopefully put your thumb on the scale to make things better. I mean, it's a great job, but it is. In this environment, it's incredibly competitive, right? Money is a commodity, and it's a knife fight every day. And certainly with rounds and valuations the way they are coming together, it's a hard business. You see it on your side. Seed round prices have gone up. The round speeds are, getting shorter and shorter. Diligence, in a lot of cases, it feels like is going by the wayside because rounds happen so fast, and it's a bit of a scary time.
I think that sums it up beautifully. I really appreciate you increasing the GDP of my network and the podcast, so thank you. Just so you know, in board meetings, I tend to nod off a little, so just leave, at my age, just don't wake me suddenly in a Payitoff board meeting.
That's all right. I'll just throw something at you. I'll throw a paper airplane at
If you see me dozing, it's very dangerous to wake a sleeping old man. And so just be nice. Just
Sure.
a gentle nudge. But I'm not ashamed of falling asleep on a Zoom call with my video on. So, Justin, I'll probably see you at a board meeting soon.
Yes.
And we'll get together in New York for sure. And I'm excited to work on more stuff with Social Leverage and Lightspeed. So I really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me, Howard. It was great. And Knut, it was nice meeting you. Cheers.
Nice to meet you too. Thank you.
Cheers. So there you have it. Another genius young man.
Yeah. Where did you find all these geniuses?
I'm lucky. I just put the vibe out there that Howie Lindzen open for business.
That still works, huh?
The GDP of Howie. First of all, it's just a miracle, some of these products, how the internet works and how you can buy shit and just have stuff at your house like magically in a day. Compared to where we were at ASU and it took 4 hours to get a brain freezy drink at a pub on Mill Avenue.
Yeah.
And, I thought flat screens were the best it could be. But now we've got Netflix and Stripe. And Payitoff sounds cool, huh, Knut? You're a little excited.
I love Payitoff.
I saw a little tingle in your eye.
Now I just love it.
Isn't it? He explained it well. He asked me to explain it and people come away confused.
No, he definitely explained it the best way I've heard it so far.
Oh my God. He explained it the way Bobby has explained it to me. And then lost in translation. Howard plays broken telephone venture capitalist. I scare a lot of people out of our deals because I get excited and then I don't really fully understand how great the products are. But whatever, Larry David. And you are listening to Panic with Friends, where I talk with friends like Justin, who are way smarter than me and living a little bit in the future. And Knut and I rap with them, and venture capitalists, entrepreneurs, growth people, leading sales, but people who are pushing the frontier incrementally and sometimes bigly. If you like talking about trends and investing, what I say for profit and joy, tune in. You can go to Spotify, Apple, or my YouTube channel, Howard Lindzen. Subscribe, and you'll get an alert every time I have one of these shows, which is once a week on Thursdays. Thanks, Knut, for putting this together. Thanks, StockTwits, for distributing, and we will see everybody next week.
Howard Lindzen is the founder and general partner at Social Leverage. All opinions expressed by Howard and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of Social Leverage or StockTwits. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for decisions. Guests may maintain positions in securities discussed in this podcast.
Stuff at your house like magically in a day. Compared to where we were at ASU and it took 4 hours to get a brain freezy drink at a pub on Mill Avenue.
Yeah.
And, I thought flat screens were the best it could be. But now we've got Netflix and Stripe. And Payitoff sounds cool, huh, Knut? You're a little excited.
I love Payitoff.
I saw a little tingle in your eye.
Now I just love it.
Isn't it? He explained it well. He asked me to explain it and people come away confused.
No, he definitely explained it the best way I've heard it so far.
Oh my God. He explained it the way Bobby has explained it to me and then lost in translation. Howard plays broken telephone venture capitalist. I scare a lot of people out of our deals because I get excited and then I don't really fully understand how great the products are. But whatever, Larry David. And you are listening to Panic with Friends, where I talk with friends like Justin, who are way smarter than me and living a little bit in the future. And Knut and I rap with them, and venture capitalists, entrepreneurs, growth people, leading sales, but people who are pushing the frontier incrementally and sometimes bigly. If you like talking about trends and investing, what I say for profit and joy, tune in. You can go to Spotify, Apple, or my YouTube channel, Howard Lindzen. Subscribe, and you'll get an alert every time I have one of these shows, which is once a week on Thursdays. Thanks, Knut, for putting this together. Thanks, StockTwits, for distributing, and we will see everybody next week.
Howard Lindzen is the founder and general partner at Social Leverage. All opinions expressed by Howard and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of Social Leverage or StockTwits. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for decisions. Guests may maintain positions in securities discussed in this podcast. Purposes only and should not be relied upon